Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, the Independent Commission for Infrastructure walks back on next week's planned live stream, saying it's still finalizing guidelines and there are no public hearings next week. The ASEAN Business Advisory Council prepares for the turnover this weekend of the ASEAN chairmanship from Malaysia to the Philippines as government corruption allegations weigh investor perceptions. We speak with George Barcelon, member of the ASEAN-backed Philippines, now shortly on his way to Kuala Lumpur. Corruption allegations on top of typhoons may have led to slower economic growth in the third quarter, says the University of Asia and the Pacific, as it forecasts 5.2%. Senior economist Vic Abola joins us live. The Independent Commission for Infrastructure has withdrawn their commitment to live stream their proceedings next week. That's because of the unavailability of one of its members, former Public Works Secretary Babe Singson. ICI Executive Director Attorney Brian Hosaka, however, assures that they recognize the calls of the people for open hearings and they are pushing for it as soon as possible.
We hear the clamor of the Filipino people for more transparency, and we are pushing to live stream the hearings as soon as possible. However, before we do so, the ICI would need to study and draft the rules of procedure and parameters to allow for live streaming, taking into consideration sensitive information and the constitutional rights of invited resource persons.
Meanwhile, the Public Works Department has filed graft and malversation charges to over 20 officials and contractors linked to the questionable flood control projects. 12 officials from DPWH La Union's 2nd District Engineering Office, along with representatives of Silver Wolves Construction Corporation, are accused of mishandling a 180 million peso flood control project. In Davao Occidental, 8 DPWH officials and St. Timothy Construction Corporation owned by the Discayas face complaints over 96.5 million pesos of ghost flood control projects. Ombudsman Boying Rimulya confirmed that these complaints have moved to preliminary evaluation. The flood control scandal can weaken the country's economic growth outlook until next year. Research firm BMI says the corruption investigation erodes business confidence and dampen infrastructure spending, which has slowed by about 25% year on year. BMI notes if this remains weak, a drag on economic growth will likely be seen in the coming quarters. Government data showed infrastructure and capital overlays dropped 21.8% year on year to almost 85 billion pesos in August. BMI also said the scandal has significantly weakened the local stock market, with the Philippine Stock Exchange Index plunging below the 6,000 mark last month to a 6-month low. ASEAN hosting at a time of escalating political risk. That is the dilemma Philippine business leaders face now as the ASEAN Business Advisory Council Philippines officially accepts the ASEAN chairmanship for 2026 from Malaysia this Sunday, October 26. As the country faces its biggest challenge yet involving government corruption allegations, the question is the Philippines ready to take the lead in the ASEAN? With us now for more is George Barcelon, member of the ASEAN-backed Philippines and chairman of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Good seeing you again, George. Welcome back to the program, and thank you for making time, as I know that you're headed in a few to fly to Kuala Lumpur for the turnover.
That's right. Thank you, Cathy, for inviting me.
So what's the mood like as the Philippines engages or re-engages with ASEAN foreign investors, potential and current, but this time under a climate of unprecedented uncertainty linked to the government corruption allegations?
Well, definitely, with this serious corruption cases that's confronting us, no? It has shaken the trust of, basically the business sector, the private sector in the Philippines to the core. Nobody had thought the gravity of this corruption is so vast. Of course, this has been taken up also in the media, the foreign countries. I was in Malaysia also in September 21 when we had that mass trillion whatever demonstration. And my ASEAN friends was asking me, of course, the gravity of this. They were quite surprised. So I can say for sure that yes, we are under a bit of doubts by other countries what has been happening. But we're very optimistic that with the effort that the government is taking on with the I hope that they will be able to resolve with finality some of the key projects, some of the obvious corruption and those ghost projects that the people will be held liable and they would be found guilty, and the restitution should follow.
Yeah, talk to us about the gravity, because it's not like this didn't happen. And as we were recalling before the show began, when we did take the ASEAN membership 10 years ago, we were faced with the pork barrel funds issue, the PDAF issue. And how did we get on? How did the private sector get on back then?
During 2015, of course, we had the PDAF. What had happened was that issue was blown wide open, and there were personalities that were involved. And we're glad that they were found guilty and they were adjudged to serve time. But what's surprising that knowing that we should have provided some safeguard. This particular case of public works, flood protection, corruption is beyond anybody's imagination. You're not talking about millions, you're talking about billions. And if you compute the last 2.5 years or whatever, it's amounting to a trillion. And that's a very substantial amount that could really shake the stability of our country's economy.
Well, as Joey pointed out, the ASEAN 2026 is going to be the biggest event of its scale under President Marcos's administration. Is the president attending the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit this weekend?
Yes, there's a session wherein it's for the Leader Summit, and I believe President BBM will be there. That's a portion wherein each country will present issues that's relevant to the ASEAN. And we will have all the leaders sit in one big convention hall, and the ASEAN members also around sitting around that convention hall. And it's not only ceremonial, but it's also a meeting wherein exchanges of ideas and bringing out some of the key issues that affects ASEAN. ASEAN now, if you look at it, it's a very important bloc. We have 650 million population. And world trade is concerned, we're double digits. We're like $3.5 trillion. So this growth potential is there. European countries are very aware of it, UK and of course US also. So it's important that we get to put ourselves in the right image, that we're ready for business, and the issues on corruption hopefully would be contained and minimized.
But first, we got to have the money to mount a successful hosting for 2026. So how is the budget for the ASEAN chairmanship looking? Do you have any info on whether the Office of the President secured a higher budget for next year? Because that's what he had asked for, to accommodate expenses as ASEAN chair.
Yes. Well, this is a joint effort between the private and the government. But of course, the government has to do the heavy lifting. There was a meeting that was called for by First Lady Lisa. I believe that was either latter part of last week or early part of this week, wherein the various government agencies are looped into what's going on. From the side of the private sectors, we take our cue also from the Department of Foreign Affairs, because this is basically an international event, and the schedules and the key narratives will have to be guided through the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Well, the Office of the President is asking Congress for 27.28 billion pesos. That represents a 72% increase from the current year's 15.8. Do you have any figures on how much the Office of the President got, and how much of a cost is the private sector willing to contribute if indeed it didn't get to 72%?
What I know is what you have stated earlier, the budget that hopefully will be allocated by Congress. But I do know for a fact that when we were together in Indonesian uh, hosting, the last day I had the privilege of sitting beside First Lady Lisa, and he turned to me and said, "It's a very grandeur presentation by the Indonesian ASEAN uh, private sectors." So she said, "Can we match it?" I said, "We'll do our best, and if we have the right budget."
All right, I see a smile there, so I guess that isn't yet a done deal.
Yeah,
All right,
it's a
but
work in progress, Kathy.
okay, and we do have a lot of image rebuilding, if you will, and you're going to be the face of the private sector when you arrive in KL in a few hours. What are you hoping to say? Is there like a narrative, a communications narrative coming from the private sector while the government tries to figure out the anomalous flood control projects issue at home?
Well, I'll share with them our thoughts from the private sector side that we hope there will be more transparency. Earlier, what was discussed about was whether they can have that a live stream, the investigation. And we would like that because primarily if it's live stream, then we would know what are the questions being asked, okay? Because you can have a close investigation and we don't even know what's being asked. So that's one key area. And the other thing is like we'd like to see the body language of those who are being asked, whether they're very upfront in answering or whether they're screaming, trying to hide whatever they know. So I think it's important for a live streaming of this investigation.
Very important, the body language, and also what you project being the face of the private sector. MSMEs, as I understand, is a priority agenda for the ASEAN-backed chairmanship. What are you hoping to do to proceed with these plans despite the problems that we're facing right now in the Philippines?
Well, the tagline for 2026 would be navigating the future for prosperity of especially focus on the MSMEs. We know very well MSMEs is composed of about 98% of the establishment, generate about 40% of the employment and so on and so forth. So we'd like to really try to move on like other more advanced ASEAN countries in the digital platform. We have, of course, improved quite a bit during this administration, where a lot of connectivity has been improved in the less serviced area. But we still have our challenges as far as as far as competitive power rates, competitive logistic cost, and of course this cloud hanging above us that's has already have our ASEAN neighbors or foreign investors taking a second look. Anybody who want to invest in the Philippines right now, I have to honestly tell you, they will hold on muna, or they might even take a step back. So we play the role of really being optimistic, telling them that government has a handle on this, and I hope that government will back us up. We're telling them that the government has a good handle on what's happening. So I hope that the government will back us up in the shortest possible time before the end of the year, that there will be some resolutions and to the satisfaction of not really the foreign investors, but what's even important is to our people. That's even more important. The trust that has been shaken, and it's the trust of the Filipino people that takes priority.
That's a tough task you have, and I wish you well. Safe journey to KL. George Barcelon of the ASEAN-backed Philippines and PCCI. You are watching Money Talks. Coming up, the country's budget deficit narrows in September. And catch our conversation with senior economist Vic Abola on the country's slower economic growth. Keep it here on One News. back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. The Bureau of Treasury says the country's budget deficit narrowed in September as corruption probes into flood control projects slowed government spending. The fiscal gap shrank by over 9% year-on-year to 248 billion pesos, while month-on-month it nearly tripled from the 85 billion pesos posted in August. PID Senior Research Fellow John Paulo Rivera says the narrower gap likely reflected delayed public disbursements, especially in infrastructure amid ongoing investigations. For its part, Fitch Unit BMI expects the deficit to hit 5.5% of GDP this year, matching the ceiling set by the DBCC. Big tech led a market rally Thursday as trade tensions eased and investors looked ahead of inflation data, brushing off concerns that higher oil prices could stoke consumer prices. The Dow rose by 0.3%, S&P 500 up 0.6%, and the Nasdaq advanced by nearly 1%. The benchmark 10-year Treasury yields ticked up to 3.988% ahead of the September CPI print, and gold rebounded, settling at $4,125 an ounce after 2 days of losses. U.S. futures are pointing to slight gains when the markets open later tonight Manila time. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 up by 0.1%, and the Nasdaq rose about 0.2%. As for the Asian markets, it's trading mixed this Friday, with Australia's ASX down by 0.1%. South Korea's Kospi rises about 2%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 gains 1.25%. And taking a quick check on our own markets here in the Philippines, PSEI opens this Friday slightly higher by about 0.1% at 6,062. The local bourse marginally improved Thursday as investors hunted for cheap stocks following a steep decline the previous day. By the end of the session, the benchmark index gained by about 0.4%, with a mixed performance across local counters. As for the Philippine peso, it opens today a tad stronger, 58.55 to the dollar. The peso closed Thursday weaker, 58.61 against the greenback. The local unit slumped further against the dollar Thursday, hitting a fresh 9-month low following the sharp increase in global oil prices after President Trump imposed sanctions on Russian oil companies. As for the 10-year government bond yields, it ticked down to 5.967%. Typhoons and the ongoing corruption scandal involving government flood control projects may have led to slower economic growth in the third quarter, says the University of Asia and the Pacific. UANP forecasts say GDP slowed down to a 5.2% year-on-year pace, slower than the 5.5% growth recorded in the second quarter, but would match the pace recorded in the same 3-month period last year. The official GDP results are out on November 7. With us now for more is senior economist Victor Abola of UANP. It's so good seeing you, Vic. Welcome back to the program. We can't quite hear you, Vic. I believe you're muted, but between the typhoons and the ongoing corruption scandal, which one do you think shaved off more from third quarter GDP, as you're expecting 5.2% for GDP on November 7th? Vic. Vic, I believe you're still muted. We'll come back to Vic soon as he is ready for us. But first, let's talk about the latest in corporate news. Maynilad has kicked off their offer period on Thursday for its initial public offering worth up to 34.3 billion pesos. The country's largest private water concessionaire said they had secured regulatory approval for the shares priced at 15 pesos each. The offer runs until the 29th this month, ahead of a planned listing on the Philippine Stock Exchange on November 7th. This IPO is said to be the country's biggest this year and the largest since Mondanisin's record IPO that raised $1 billion in 2021. I think we got Vic Abola back on the line. Vic, are you with us? A very good morning to you. Vic, are you with us? All right, we'll come back to Vic soon as he is available. But first, let's See the Social Weather Station survey. It's pretty interesting because it finds that most adult Filipinos cope with stress by praying. 16% of adult respondents in the survey say engaging in spiritual activities is their way to manage stress. 14% responds to stress by resting or sleeping, while 11% says they're going out to relieve stressful environment. Other answers include ignoring the problem, exercising, listening to music, and even smoking. Only below 1% say they are crying to deal with stress or seek for medical help. The non-commissioned survey was conducted from September 24 to 30 to 1,500 adults nationwide. Well, speaking of praying, here's a historic prayer that happened inside the Sistine Chapel. King Charles and Pope Leo XIV prayed side by side, the first time a British monarch and a pontiff do so in nearly 500 years. The service marks the first joint worship since King Henry VIII broke from Rome in 1534. Latin chants and English prayers filled the chapel, where Leo was elected as the first pope from the U.S. King Charles and Queen Camilla is on a state visit to the Vatican to celebrate warmer and renewed ties between Anglicans and Catholics. The visits also coincide with the Vatican's 2025 Jubilee. All right, we got Vic back on the line with us, Vic Abola of UANP. Good to have you back, Vic. Great, 5.2% for the third quarter. Which one do you think is going to have more of an impact? Is it the typhoons or is it the anomalous flood control projects and the corruption that goes with it?
Mostly the corruption issue, because we've seen in the last July and August, the drop actually minus 11% in current and capital spending of the national government.
All right, so you chose corruption issues, and because you did, there's a lot more we don't know. And in fact, the level of frozen assets has gone beyond $5 billion, and we have yet to know more as the ICI live streams the investigations. So to what extent do you think that might affect fourth quarter GDP, given all the unknowns?
I think that's going to be with us for a while until it's, at the taxing settle. Well, we do have some positive news for especially for the consumer. My projected average inflation for fourth quarter is only 1.6. So that will enable consumers to, continue their spending, but also we've seen a big jump in employment last month. So, and I guess those two things combined in order to give at least, performance around the 5.5.
Got that. And it's one metric that the Bangko Sentral Governor, Eli Remolona himself, is tracking along with the performance in the stock market and the peso. As you know, the peso's already fallen to a fresh 9-month low, and the stock market's fallen below 6,000 in the previous month. To what extent might that keep the Bangko Sentral from cutting in December?
I think they will continue cutting. They will cut another 25 basis points, and I believe they can do some more in 2026 by at least 50 basis points. And that will just bring us to policy rate at the end of 2026, but to 4%, which is higher than where we came from. For a long time, we had policy rate of 3%. But, 3% is fairly good enough because the low interest rates will enable actually the private sector to be, especially in the residential construction. So it's a slowdown because your monthly amortizations have gone up. And it's so important that the BSP supports not only residential but overall firms in order to expand their operations.
Yeah, but Vic, what we haven't seen is that the peso has fallen to fresh 9-month lows. I know that you've long advocated for the Bangko Sentral to allow the peso to weaken. It has weakened and is weakening some more. So do you think a weakened peso might constrain the Bangko Sentral from cutting a lot more than it should?
I think they have an informal threshold, but they will probably allow it to depreciate some more. I think at this time they would have like 60 as a threshold that they wouldn't want to cross because of sentiment. So, but overall, it continues to depreciate right now. It's not very, very large. Actually, we're talking about 2%, a little bit than 2% depreciation for every peso. So it's not, it's not so substantial, but it helps a lot of the values, our exporters to be able to compete. All the values will really, I think, drive part of the consumption spending in the fourth quarter.
Well, there are two sides. It could be inflationary. A lot more Filipinos unable to afford what they can at the current levels. But a weaker peso also augurs well for our remitting overseas Filipino workers. But Vic, there is President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, Foreign Remittance Tax Bill, and that is taking effect on January 1st of 2026. So that means a 1% tax on all of the remittances from the U.S. to international destinations like the Philippines. So what impact do you think this might have on remittance flows, which are so important to GDP?
Well, I think the thing is that if the peso depreciates a bit to compensate for that tax that is going to be imposed on remittances, then there will be minimum effect. So, but the peso has to depreciate by that much in order to compensate for that. Now, the idea that inflation is very much affected by the exchange rate, the pass-through, what we call it, pass-through from the peso depreciation to inflation is quite low, hovering between 10 to 15%. Meaning 10% is in depreciation would lead only to 1% to 1.5%. So it's not a major issue, especially at this time where we have already low inflation below the BSP target.
All right, we got that. Then we're holding on to 5.2 as that is your forecast, the lowest so far from what we have gathered. Thank you so much, Vic Abola of UANP. I much appreciate the insights. And that is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again Monday, 9:30 a.m. Kapatid, we are One News, all sides, all the time. Have a great weekend ahead, and I'll see you Monday.